Hi, everyone. My name is Stephanie. Thank you for joining this conversation about building an experimentation culture when a platform isn't enough. I am calling in from Colorado in the middle of the United States. Wasn't able to unfortunately make the hop over the pond to join you all today, but hopefully this will still be a fun 20 minutes that we have together. So a little bit more about me and why I love A/B testing so much. I started my career at Airbnb as a senior data scientist. And at the time that I was at Airbnb, they had invested a lot in the A/B testing, and they had an internal platform that even had the team supporting it. The culture is very rich. They're using A/B testing to inform decisions all over the place. And I was fortunate enough to be on a team that was just like an A/B testing machine. We ran over 100 A/B tests during my 3.5 years there. And I just really came to understand and appreciate how impactful it can be to help drive a business, and also tried to give some of that knowledge back to the non-technical people at the company. So just really learn from the best. I then went to Strava. That was a little bit earlier in their experimentation journey, will we say. They had an internal platform that they had invested in, but they weren't using it for every feature that they were developing. So it was kind of hit or miss whether it was being used. Given that I had just come from Airbnb and saw how rich experimentation could be, I was really focused there on driving the culture forward and what might we do to be able to leverage this platform that we've invested in even better. Most recently, I joined Training Peaks as the head of data there. Training Peaks is an app for coaches to work with their athletes, usually in running, triathlon, or cycling. And Training Peaks is even earlier in the A/B testing journey. So we're just doing our first A/B tests now. So really got to see like a full spectrum of where a company can be in experimentation. So today we'll be talking about 3 things. 1, why is experimentation important? And just to clarify, when I say experimentation here, I do mean A/B testing. Really understanding that key piece and making sure that everyone at the company understands it is one of the pillars for a good culture. Then we'll talk about what is a signal that you're in a healthy experimentation culture. Like, what is a company, like, what do I even mean? What does the company look like where experimentation is being leveraged fully? And then if that culture description doesn't quite fit with your experience, we're going to talk about some common blockers to reaching that culture and some things that you might be able to do to overcome those blockers. So the goal is at the end of this very short time together that you will have, you will have a sense of where you could be going if you're not already there, and hopefully have some very tactical ideas for things you can try in your company to start moving forward. Okay. So you all opted into this talk, so you probably have a sense of this already, but it's good to re-anchor. Let's say that your team has 20 ideas. These are really solid product ideas. There's a reason to believe that each one of these is going to move the needle for your customer and your business. How many do we think are actually going to work? And I will let you yell it out loud in the room, put your hands up, or just keep it inside. The answer is about 4. Depending on the maturity of the company and who you ask, only about 10 to 33% of product ideas actually have the positive impact that they were intended. Only about 4 out of 20 A/B tests are actually going to result in a positive change. We as humans are just really terrible at predicting how changes are going to impact our entire user base, right? There's a lot of different people in there. So this is why A/B testing is so important. It's how you make sure that the changes you're making to the product are good ones. Making sure that when you ship something out, it actually is good, that you're learning from the things that are working, and that you're identifying when you're actually having unintended consequences. A/B testing is by far the best way to do this. However, and this is why we're here, right? Reaching the full potential of A/B testing requires a healthy experimentation culture. And I'll say this a couple times. The platform, and we'll talk about what that means in a couple of slides, is necessary. It allows you to do A/B testing, but is not sufficient. There's a whole company culture that needs to be present in order to really reach the full potential of an A/B testing. So what does this healthy experimentation culture look like? Here are some signals that a company has a healthy experimentation culture. So you have a product team, product managers, engineers, data people, designers, UX perhaps, product marketers. Nice group of people, have some really great ideas, right? These are really promising ideas and everyone's excited about them. In a healthy experimentation culture, these product ideas are A/B tested. That might seem obvious, but it's not guaranteed that all the ideas that are reasonable to A/B test are actually going to be wrapped in an A/B test. There are costs to doing that, right? So in a healthy culture, the ideas are actually A/B tested. Further, the tests are high quality. So what I mean by that is when the A/B test results come in and you're reading them, you trust them. They are taken at face value and speak the truth. You can trust that the data below that is correct and that what you are seeing is accurate. So the tests need to be quality and the changes need to be tested. In a healthy experimentation culture, the teams engage with the results, not just the data scientist or data analyst looking at the statistics and like, oh, that's fun, or the product manager who knows that they need to talk about the success of their team, but everyone on the team, even the most junior engineer, the designers, everyone who was involved in getting that change out the door really wants to know and wants to learn what worked, what didn't work, what can we learn from this when it doesn't work, just as much as we can from when it does. Everyone's engaging with the results and really eager to see how things are shaking out. In a healthy experimentation culture, results are also used to understand KPI movements. So if you haven't been introduced to the HIPPO, that is the highest paid person's opinion, leadership, right? Leadership really wants to know what is driving our business, right? We see at a high level revenue, whatever your North Star metric is, hopefully it's going up and to the right when we're tracking it across our entire business. In the healthy experimentation culture, the A/B test results are used to help identify what movement in that top North Star metric is because of things that our team did, investments we made, products we shipped, versus external factors that may or may not and often are not in our control. So you're able to connect the two. And finally, in a healthy experimentation culture, learnings reach decision makers across the company. So when you learn from an A/B test, what works, what doesn't, what's surprising, it doesn't just sit and stay in that team that made the change. It reaches other teams in the company as well, so that everyone can be building off of what has already been learned and building that institutional knowledge and running towards what's most effective together, rather than reinventing the wheel or wasting time when they could have known something wasn't going to work. So there needs to reach beyond just the team that made the change, beyond leadership, but to everybody. So everyone's excited to see what happened. So this is what healthy experimentation culture looks like above the surface. Beautiful plant, all these wonderful things going on. How do we get there? Beneath the surface, there is a lot of different pieces that need to be in place in order to achieve that healthy culture. The platform, right, is necessary, but not sufficient. There's a whole culture that needs to be in place as well. The benefits of testing need to clearly outweigh the cost. You need to be able to trust the results. And let's talk about these each a little bit more. So, what are some common blockers to reaching that culture, and what can you do about it? Comes down to this cost-benefit trade-off. If you're in a situation where the benefits of A/B testing far outweigh the costs, like so far clear it's worth to do, then you're going to be in a healthy culture because things will be tested and you'll be leveraging all the benefits that we just talked about. Now, here's why the platform is necessary. It helps reduces the costs. It reduces the amount of time that engineers need to spend setting up a test, and it reduces the data scientist or data analyst time to interpret their results, especially the data scientist time. No longer is that data person a blocker in getting the results. You can get them instantaneously. Also, some platforms, whether you're using a third-party tool or invest in the functionality yourself, can actually reduce the runtime of an A/B test by applying things like variance reduction. So it can save time both in the human and in the actual runtime itself. So platforms are a wonderful thing. But even with a platform, it's not zero cost, right? So we need some benefits to make this really worth it. A big benefit, and we hinted at this in the culture, right? A big benefit is being able to connect the test results to the business. So how do we do this? It's actually not trivial for most companies. On the left, we have maybe what like you might see if you're interpreting an A/B test. Okay, we're trying to drive usage of this feature or these set of features. We did 10% relative increase. Like that's really awesome. And it's clearly statistically significant. So we're pretty sure this really happened. Like we really increased the usage of the feature. But our company North Star is subscriptions or revenue. How do we connect the usage of a feature to revenue, right? Or subscriptions? This connection can be really difficult to establish. So there's three factors that will help you make sure that you're using the right metric in your A/B test to set you up for making that connection with the business. The first is the metric is close in the user journey and time to the changes being made. So let's use this example. You make a product change, right? Maybe it's the UI of a certain feature, and what you're trying to drive is some outcome, right? So let's say that you're driving usage of a feature and that outcome is a subscription. What needs to happen between those two things? Is it a quick connection and like one usually happens right after another? Great. If not, every single step in a user journey that happens between that change you made and the metric you're observing is an introduction of noise. It makes it harder to drive that outcome and it makes it harder to detect it. You got all these distractions that are pulling people away from the impact of your change. Further, if it's not only in distance and user journey, but also in time, like maybe you can imagine, say, Airbnb, and you're trying to drive reviews. Well, if it's in the product, someone has to book, then stay, then review. There's a lot of time in between each of those things. What if it takes 4 weeks? I'm fine adding 4 weeks to every A/B test to make sure that not only do we have power, but we're observing our outcome. Yes, there's no PM ever. We don't want to wait that long. Tight feedback loop, right? Reduce time to learning so we can keep moving forward. Making sure the metric is close to the change you make and that the lag is as minimal as possible is critical to connecting out changes and A/B test results to the metric in the business. The second one is the nature of the metric itself, reducing the variance. The reason for this is what you may be familiar with, the concept of that power analysis. How long do we need to run our test? How many users do we need in order to detect this change that we care about? So if I only care about detecting a 10% change, maybe I can get away with running it for a week. But if I want to know if the change was smaller, like 1%, I'm going to need to run it a lot longer. There's this trade-off between runtime and how much of an impact you're able to detect. However, you cannot control the number of users, right? Like we all wish we were Facebook and had many, many users and could run our tests with significant power quickly, right? That would be great. But we have how many users we have today. The effect is going to be what it is. Usually we want to detect as small a change as we can within a reasonable amount of runtime. So you can't really change what the true effect is, and you can't change the number of users. What you can change is the metric itself. The more variance there is in a metric, the longer you're going to need to run that test to get the same amount of minimal detectable effect. If you have a conversion metric, so something that's just it happened or it did not, it's between 0 and 1, the higher that conversion rate is, the better position you'll be to detect a change. So if you have a conversion rate of like 0.001, maybe you want to find a leading indicator of that has a higher base rate. So try to find the metric that's going to set you up for success in detecting a change as quickly as possible. The third one is the metric is closely related to that KPI. In an ideal world, we could all just A/B test against revenue if that's what we wanted to measure. However, as we just talked about with those other two considerations, that's often not feasible. Revenue has a lot of variance. There's often outliers. It can make it a lot harder. So if you're able to directly measure A/B test against your North Star metric, fantastic, definitely do that. If you can't, ideally you have a causal indicator. So you can say, yes, I know driving usage of this feature leads to subscriptions. We've established this causal connection from past A/B tests or causal inference analysis. But often you just need to start with something that's correlation, and you start there. We know that people who take this action have a higher conversion rate. So if we can drive more people to take that action, hopefully it leads to that higher conversion rate. And we're going to assume this is causal for now and try to establish that over time. So If you can't measure your KPI directly, start with correlation. Okay, so we connected it to the business, the benefits are coming, it's looking a little bit better. What else can we do? What is another benefit of A/B testing? The learnings, right? We want to learn as a company what is working, what is not, and building off of that institutional knowledge so that we get faster and faster in improving our business. This is about the right balance for your company. You don't want to over inundate people with too much information and then they won't get any of it, right? But you want to make sure decision makers have that right information about what works and what doesn't that's relevant to them when they need it. What communication style works for your company? If you're a smaller organization, maybe an all hands where you have a spotlight for experiments that ran recently could work. It could be an experiment review meeting that happens every month and you go through the results of the test. Or maybe something that's a little bit lighter touch, like an email newsletter. Google Groups makes it really easy to set up a newsletter style where people can opt in. And then every time an experiment ships, you just have a TLDR. This is the change. This is what happens. Click here for more information. Maybe a Slack channel is more of your vibe, or maybe you build this into your platform. The key is to find that right balance. And very importantly, make sure that every single test is consistently communicated. Otherwise, you might get into a position where people are only celebrating the successes and there's not that psychological safety for risk, which is also important. So you want to be consistent, but how you communicate is really going to depend on your organization, and you can try multiple things and see what works. Okay, so benefits, this is looking amazing. We got our healthy culture right, reduced our costs, have all these benefits from it. Done, right? Not quite. Trust, right? I alluded to this earlier. If you don't trust those results, there goes the benefits. It's only cost. It's just not worth it. You don't know when you can and you can't interpret those results for those tests that you invested in setting up. What degrades trust? Systematic errors. These typically fall into two categories. The first is in the setup of the A/B test. Something I've seen is the treatment is not delivered. So you thought you had a new design, but turns out the two groups both have the old design and it's actually an AA test and you're not measuring anything. That's sad, right? Worse is traffic imbalance, which is also called sample mismatch ratio. A/B testing only works when the A and the B are basically identical populations, because that enables you to know any difference we see is due to our change, right? Because everything else is the same. If you intended to have a 50-50 split and it's not 50-50, that's an indication that those two groups are actually not the same. There's something different about them. And then when you're looking at the results, you don't know, did this metric go up because of our change or because this group is just higher intent than the other? They're not equal anymore. You really can't tell. So traffic imbalance can be really detrimental and will degrade trust if that happens often. The other side is interpretation. So human errors when computing statistics, right? Any human introduces the opportunity for issues. That can degrade trust. And then also, and this could be a talk on its own, your data quality. If the underlying data is bad, junk in, junk out, right? If you can't trust that data that is bubbling up to your metric, then you can't trust the metric and you won't be able to interpret your results. A platform can help regain trust. It can identify when the traffic imbalance occurs early so that you can fix it rather than waiting till the end and then afterwards, maybe after you communicated it, finding there was an issue. And it also takes the human out of the loop. So it not only saves time on the analysis, but it also reduces the chance that there's an error there. So with our platform, we have our platform, right? But we also have the benefits from the culture and the processes. And now we are in a great place again. So in conclusion, healthy experimentation culture looks like product changes are A/B tested. Those tests are high quality. You trust the results. Everyone's engaging with the results. The results are used to understand business KPI movements, right? You can connect the two. You know what's because of you versus external factors. And the learnings reach decision makers across the company. You're building off of each other. Solutions to common blockers typically fall into two groups. The platforms we talked about, necessary, saves time for the humans, can speed up the process by reducing runtime, and can also just maintain trust by reducing errors or at least flagging them if there's a setup error. Then there's the processes side of it, making sure you have the right metric to set yourself up for success. And also you have a way to share learnings that really spreads the joy and learnings of A/B testing across the whole company. So that is all I have for today. Hopefully I made it in my 20 minutes. Please give feedback. Where'd you get bored? Where was interesting? What was new? What do you disagree with? So helpful. Please reach out on LinkedIn. I know I don't have a lot of time for questions, so I'd love to hear from you on the platform for SQL Bits or via LinkedIn. Please reach out. Also, I teach a A/B testing, like more hands-on class on a platform called UpLimit, and it starts next week. So if you think that might be interesting to you, you can check it out with that link below. Yes, that is all I have. Thank you.